The sovereign chamber of the Galactic Conclave had stood for 11 million years. Its walls were made from the bones of dead stars. Its floor was crystal that glowed with the light of 1,000 captured suns. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds formed beneath it, and lightning flickered in those clouds like the anger of ancient gods. 12,000 representatives filled the vast amphitheater. They came from 900 different species. Some were giants made of living stone. Some were clouds of glowing gas that floated above their seats. Some were creatures of pure thought, existing only as mathematical equations that hung in the air like frozen fire. They had ruled the galaxy for longer than Earth's sun had burned, and in the center of it all, surrounded by armed guards from 17 different worlds, stood a single human woman. Ambassador Priya Okonkwo did not flinch. She did not tremble. She did not look away from the ancient powers that surrounded her. She was 53 years old. She stood 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighed 120 pounds. By the standards of the beings around her, she was nothing. A fragile creature made of carbon and water from a small blue world that had only discovered faster than light travel 18 months ago. The Supreme Arbiter leaned forward on his throne. He was a being of living obsidian, black as the void between galaxies, and he had ruled this chamber for 300,000 years. When he spoke, his voice echoed across dimensions. It shook the walls. It made the air itself tremble. "You are not summoned," he said. "You are not invited. The Galactic Conclave does not recognize your species. By what authority do you stand in this chamber, human?" Priya smiled. It was a small smile. The kind of smile humans make when they know something others do not. "By the authority of Article 7, Section 12 of the Founding Compact," she said. Her voice was calm, clear. It carried to every corner of the vast chamber without any amplification. "The article your ancestors wrote 11 million years ago. The article you hoped no species would ever discover." Silence fell over the chamber. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when 12,000 beings stop breathing at the same time. The Supreme Arbiter's obsidian form cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to show that something had shaken him to his core. "How?" he whispered. "Do you know about Article 7? Priya reached into her jacket. She pulled out a small crystal, human-made, primitive by galactic standards. She held it up so everyone could see. "Because we read your entire archive," she said. "All 400 trillion years of it. Every document. Every treaty. Every secret you have tried to bury." She paused. She let the tension build. "And we found the loophole you created to keep new species out. We also found how to use it to get in." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives screamed in 1,000 languages. Some called for war. Some called for calm. Some simply stared at the small human woman who had done the impossible. Priya waited. She had expected this. She had prepared for it. 18 months ago, humanity had received its first signal from the stars. It was a test, a puzzle designed to measure intelligence. The Conclave sent these puzzles to every new species they discovered. Most species took decades to solve them. Some took centuries. Humanity solved it in 6 hours. The ancient being assigned to watch Earth, an observer named Holeth, who had monitored the planet for 10,000 years, was stunned. He reported to his superiors with words that would echo through history. "The humans are not what we expected." After solving the puzzle, Earth sent a diplomatic mission to the nearest Conclave outpost. They requested membership in the galactic community. They were rejected. The Conclave had rules. A species must prove civilization stability for at least 1 million years before being considered. Humanity was only 300,000 years old. The diplomats returned home. Most of them were defeated, humiliated, ready to give up. But Priya was not defeated. She looked at the rejection, and she saw opportunity. She assembled a secret team. The greatest minds on Earth came together: historians, codebreakers, language experts, and one very unusual physicist named Dr. Marcus Fell. He had a theory about how information moved through quantum networks. He believed he could access systems that were supposed to be impossible to reach. For 14 months, they worked in secret. They cracked security that had held for billions of years. They read documents written before Earth's sun existed. They learned secrets that the Conclave had buried so deep they thought no one would ever find them. And they found Article 7. It was a failsafe, written by the Conclave's original founders. A way for any species to demand a hearing if they could prove they possessed something the Conclave needed. Something unique. Something no one else could provide. Priya realized that humanity did possess such a thing. But proving it would require a demonstration that could fail. A gamble that could destroy everything. She went to the leaders of Earth. She made her case. For the first time in human history, all of Earth's governments united behind a single plan. Now she stood in the sovereign chamber. She had arrived unannounced. She had slipped past security, using the back doors her team had found in the archives. By the time anyone realized what had happened, she was already standing on the speaker's platform. The chaos in the chamber began to quiet. The Supreme Arbiter raised his hand for silence. "You have committed crimes against this conclave," he said. His voice was cold now, dangerous. "You have accessed restricted archives. You have entered this chamber without permission. You have violated a dozen sacred laws." He stood from his throne. It was the first time he had stood in 50,000 years. "Give me one reason why I should not order your immediate execution." Priya did not step back. She did not show fear. "Because of what else we found in your archives, Supreme Arbiter," she said. "We discovered something about the founders themselves. Something you have kept hidden for 11 million years. She held up the data crystal again. "Would you like me to share it with the chamber? Would you like everyone here to know the truth about how this conclave was really built? Or would you prefer to discuss our membership request in private?" The Supreme Arbiter stared at her. For 300,000 years, no one had dared to threaten him. No one had dared to challenge his authority. And now a small human woman stood before him, holding secrets that could bring down everything he had built. The chamber waited. The galaxy held its breath. The Arbiter made his choice. "Clear the chamber," he commanded. "Ambassador, we will speak alone." As 12,000 representatives filed out of the sovereign chamber, Priya allowed herself a small moment of triumph. She had taken the first step. She had gotten their attention. Now, the real work would begin. The private chambers of the Supreme Arbiter were older than most stars. The walls pulsed with a dim light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Ancient symbols floated in the air, recording every word that was spoken. Priya stood before the Arbiter. She was alone now. No guards, no audience. Just a human woman and the most powerful being in the known universe. "Article 7, the Arbiter said. His voice was quieter now, but no less dangerous. "You know what it requires? 3 trials, Priya said, designed by 3 different factions of the Conclave. If we pass all 3, we earn the right to demonstrate our value. No species has ever passed all 3 trials." The Arbiter's obsidian face showed something that might have been amusement. 17 species have tried in the last 3 million years. All of them failed. All of them were destroyed. Destroyed? They were deemed unstable. A threat to galactic order. The Arbiter leaned closer. "If humanity fails, your world will be burned to ash. There will be no second chance. No appeals. No mercy." Priya felt her heart skip. She had known the stakes were high. She had not known they were this high, but she did not show her fear. She could not afford to show weakness. "We accept the trials," she said. The arbiter studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have 9 days. Prepare your people." Priya sent a coded message back to Earth that night. 2 words: "Begin Omega." The first trial came 3 days later. The collective of mathematical thought designed it. They were beings of pure logic, creatures that existed as living equations. They had solved problems that other species could not even understand. They believed that mathematics was the highest form of intelligence. They presented humanity with a paradox, a mathematical problem that had confused the conclave for 8 million years. No one had ever solved it. Most species went mad simply trying to understand the question. Dr. Marcus Fell was brought before the collective. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked nothing like a hero. He looked like someone who had spent too many nights staring at computer screens. The collective displayed the paradox. Numbers and symbols filled the air, twisting into patterns that hurt to look at. Marcus studied the problem for exactly 17 minutes. Then he solved it. The collective was not pleased. They were shocked, because the solution Marcus proposed was not just correct. It was more elegant than anything they had ever created. It suggested that human minds worked in ways the collective had never encountered. How? Their spokesman demanded. "How did you solve in minutes what we could not solve in 8 million years?" Marcus shrugged. "We think differently," he said. "We use metaphor. We dream. Sometimes the answer comes from a place we do not understand. We call it intuition. Intuition is not logical." "No," Marcus agreed, "but it works." The collective retreated to discuss. When they returned, they delivered their verdict. Passed. The second trial came 2 days later. The Carthan Empire designed it. They were Silicon warriors, a species that had conquered 3 galaxies through pure biological power. They believed that survival was the only measure of worth. They selected humanity's finest soldier for the trial. Her name was Sergeant Rosa Mbeki. She was 42 years old. She had never lost a fight in her life. She spoke little and smiled less. The trial was simple: survive in the pit of eternity for 1 standard hour. The pit was a nightmare. It was a chamber that changed every 60 seconds. One moment, the gravity was so strong it could crush steel. The next moment, there was no air at all. Then came temperatures that could melt rock, followed by cold that would freeze blood solid. Rosa entered the pit alone. For 58 minutes, she survived. She used every trick she had learned in a lifetime of combat. She broke bones. She bled. She should have died a dozen times. She did not die. With 2 minutes left, the Carthan observers did something unexpected. They increased the difficulty beyond the trial's official limits. They were cheating. They wanted to see the human break. Rosa noticed. And something changed in her eyes. She did not just survive those final 2 minutes. She thrived. The worse things became, the harder she fought. When she emerged from the pit, covered in blood and barely able to stand, the Carthan warriors were silent. "Your species does not know when to quit," their commander said finally. "This is disturbing." Rosa wiped blood from her face. "Thank you," she said. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said about us." Verdict passed. The third trial was different. The witnesses designed it. They were the most mysterious faction in the conclave. They existed outside of normal time. They claimed to see all possible futures. When Priya was brought before them, they did not explain the trial. They simply looked at her. Their eyes, if eyes they could be called, seemed to see through her, through time, through possibility itself. "We have already given the trial," they said. "We have seen what humanity will do if given power. We have seen your future." Priya's blood ran cold. "And what did you see?" The witnesses exchanged a glance that lasted centuries. "You are unprecedented," they said. In all the timelines we have walked, we have never seen a species like you. You are not the strongest, not the wisest, not the most advanced. Then what are we?" The witnesses spoke together, their voices echoing with the weight of prophecy. "You are unpredictable, and that makes you the most dangerous species we have ever seen." Verdict passed. The trials were complete. Humanity had done the impossible. They had passed all three, but the Supreme Arbiter rose from his throne, his obsidian form cracked and leaking light. "You have passed the trials," he admitted. "But Article 7 requires one more thing. You must prove that humanity has something the Conclave needs, something no other species can provide." He moved closer to Priya. His ancient face was terrible and cold. "I do not believe you have anything we need. I believe your species is nothing but clever animals who got lucky. And when you fail to prove your worth, I will personally watch your world burn." Priya met his gaze without flinching. "You have made two mistakes, Supreme Arbiter," she said quietly. "First, you underestimate clever animals." She smiled that dangerous human smile. "Second, you assume we came here unprepared." She had 24 hours to prove humanity's worth, 24 hours to save her world, and she knew exactly what she was going to do. Back on Earth, a message arrived in secret bunkers around the world. 2 words, "Begin Omega." Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood before a room filled with humanity's greatest creators. There were painters and musicians, writers and dancers, philosophers and poets. They had been gathered here for months, waiting for this moment. None of them knew exactly what they were preparing for. They only knew that the survival of their species depended on what they created in the next 12 hours. "We need something unprecedented," Yuki told them. "Something that captures everything humanity is. Our joy and our sorrow, our love and our fear, our ability to find beauty in darkness and meaning in chaos." A painter named Gabriel Santos raised his hand. "What format? What medium?" Yuki took a deep breath. "All of them. Every art form humanity has ever created, combined into a single experience." She explained the technology. The aliens of the Conclave could process information directly into their minds. They could experience sensations that humans could only imagine. "We are going to give them us," Yuki said. "The raw experience of being human. Everything we feel. Everything we are. Nothing hidden. Nothing held back." They called it the Testament. While Earth's artists worked through the night, things were not going well in the Sovereign Chamber. The Supreme Arbiter was not waiting quietly. He had ruled for 300,000 years by destroying threats before they could grow. He summoned the commanders of the Purification Fleet, the armada that had burned 4,000 worlds for showing signs of instability. He ordered them to move into position around Earth's sun. If Priya failed, her world would die before she could return home. But someone was watching. Haleth, the ancient observer who had studied Earth for 10,000 years, felt troubled. He had seen humans at their worst. He had watched their wars, their cruelties, their endless capacity for self-destruction. But he had also seen them at their best. He had watched them choose hope when despair was the logical choice. He had seen them love strangers and forgive enemies. He had watched them reach for stars they could not possibly touch. He made a decision. He went to the witnesses. "You saw humanity's future," he said. "What did you really see?" The witnesses were silent for a long time. "We saw every possibility," they finally said. "We saw them destroy themselves. We saw them conquer the galaxy. We saw them become gods. We saw them remain humble forever. But in every timeline, one thing was constant." What? They never stopped trying. No matter how dark things became, they never stopped reaching for something better. On Earth, the artists worked without rest. They poured their souls into their creations. Musicians composed melodies that made listeners weep. Painters created images that captured entire lifetimes in a single brushstroke. Writers crafted stories that held the weight of generations. And Dr. Tanaka wove it all together. She created something that had never existed before, a direct sensory experience of human consciousness, the beauty and the pain, the hope and the fear, the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. With 1 hour left before her deadline, Priya received the testament through a quantum link. She did not preview it. She did not know what it contained. She only knew that humanity had given her everything they had. She stood before the full conclave once more. 12,000 representatives, 900 species, beings who had lived for millions of years, beings who believed they had seen everything the universe could offer. You asked for a demonstration of value, Priya said. You asked what humanity can give the conclave. She activated the testament. We offer you ourselves. The testament flooded the chamber. Every being present received the full experience of human consciousness. They felt a child's first laugh, a soldier's last breath, a mother's love and a widow's grief. They felt the terror of facing death and the courage to face it anyway. They felt small kindnesses that went unwitnessed and grand gestures that changed history. They felt what it meant to know you would die, to have so little time, and to choose to love anyway, to create anyway, to hope anyway. For exactly 60 seconds, every being in the sovereign chamber experienced what it meant to be human. When it ended, there was silence, and then the Supreme Arbiter did something no one had ever seen, something no one believed possible. He wept. His obsidian form shook. Cracks spread across his ancient body as something inside him broke open. Sounds came from him that no being had heard in 300,000 years. He was crying. What was that? His voice shook like a child's. What did you do to me? That was humanity, Priya said. That was what you would destroy. Every moment of joy, every act of courage, every dream we have ever dreamed. She stepped closer to him. She showed no fear. But there is something else I found in your archives. Something about why the founders created the conclave in the first place. The Arbiter's eyes widened. The founders were not always what they are now. Once, long ago, they were mortal. They felt what we feel. They loved as we love. When they became immortal, they lost something precious. Something they have spent 11 million years trying to find again. She smiled softly. They lost the ability to experience life as finite beings do. They lost meaning. They lost beauty. They lost hope. She gestured to the chamber, where ancient beings were still recovering from what they had felt. And we just gave them a taste of what they have been missing for 11 million years. The Arbiter stared at her. His tears were still falling. He looked like someone who had been lost in darkness for centuries and had suddenly seen the sun. You could have used this as a weapon, he whispered. You could have demanded anything. We could have, Priya agreed. But that is not who we are. We did not come here to conquer. We came here to connect, to share, to remind you of something you forgot. She held out her hand to him. The galaxy does not need more empires, Supreme Arbiter. It needs more hope. Let us help you remember what that feels like. The Arbiter looked at her hand. He looked at his own trembling form. He looked at the chamber full of beings who were experiencing emotions they had forgotten existed. Slowly, carefully, he reached out, and he took her hand. In that moment, something changed in the galaxy. Something that had been frozen for 11 million years began to thaw. But in the shadows of the chamber, not everyone was moved. High Executor Thorn watched with cold eyes. He saw only weakness, only danger, only a threat that needed to be eliminated. He began to plan. And the purification fleet continued its silent approach toward Earth's sun. The testament had changed something in the conclave. For the first time in millions of years, ancient beings were feeling emotions they had forgotten existed. Some wept openly in the chamber. Others sat in stunned silence, processing sensations they had no names for. But not everyone was transformed. High Executor Thorn had ruled the Purification Fleet for 8 million years. He had burned 4,000 worlds. He had never failed to destroy a species deemed unstable. He would not fail now. While the Conclave recovered from the Testament, Thorn moved in secret. He contacted loyal commanders across 17 systems. He activated sleeper agents within the Council's own security forces. He prepared for war. The Supreme Arbiter had been compromised, Thorn believed. The humans had used some kind of emotional weapon to weaken him. The galaxy was in danger. Someone had to protect it. That someone had to burn Earth before it was too late. The attack came at midnight. By Council Standard Time, Priya was in her quarters when the alarms began. Red lights flashed. Warnings screamed in a dozen languages. The Council's own security forces were storming the human fleet. "This is High Executor Thorn," a voice announced over every channel. "The Supreme Arbiter has been compromised by human manipulation. I am invoking Emergency Protocol 9. The humans will be purified." Admiral Webb, commander of humanity's fleet, responded immediately. His ships formed a defensive formation around Priya's vessel. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. "All ships, defensive protocols only," Webb ordered. "We are not here to start a war. But we will not abandon our ambassador." The battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships took damage. Human sailors died at their posts. Captain James Wong of the destroyer Endurance gave his life to block a missile aimed at Priya's ship. Lieutenant Maria Vega held her engineering deck together with her bare hands. While fire raged around her dot, they were outgunned, outmatched, facing the most powerful military force in the eye. Galaxy dot, they did not surrender. Across the galaxy, beings watched the live feeds in disbelief. A species that had been in space for less than 2 centuries was standing against the ancient powers. And they were not losing. Representative Veneth of the Morlani Collective observed with his hive mind. His people were philosophers, thinkers who processed reality through collective consciousness. They had not felt true emotion in 300,000 years. But watching the humans fight, watching them die for each other, something stirred inside them. "They are willing to die for people who are not their own," Veneth said. "This is unprecedented." Back on Earth, General Amara Okafor received the distress signal. She had 37 ships. Thorn had 37,000. But Earth had been preparing for this moment. Not for weeks. Not for months. For 18 months, ever since first contact, humanity had been building something. Project Prometheus. Across the solar system, hidden installations came online. They were not weapons. They were something far more dangerous. They were signal amplifiers. "If we cannot fight them," General Okafor said, "we will change them." She gave the order. The testament was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Not just to the representatives in the Sovereign Chamber. To everyone. To billions of beings on thousands of worlds. Every species in the Conclave suddenly felt what it meant to be human. The effect was chaos. On the Carthan homeworld, Silicon warriors who had not felt anything in 1,000,000 years began to weep. In the mathematical dimensions where the collective existed, new equations bloomed. Equations that included concepts like beauty and love. And on the ships of the Purification Fleet, soldiers began to question their orders for the first time in their existence. General Vorath, the Carthan commander who had watched Rozembeki survive the pit, made his decision. He had felt the testament. He had remembered what his people used to be before they purged all emotion from their genetic code. He sent a message to every Carthan ship in Thorn's fleet. Stand down. Humanity is not our enemy. Other commanders followed. The witnesses announced their support. The Morlani Collective declared neutrality and demanded a ceasefire. One by one, the ships of the Purification Fleet stopped their assault. Thorn screamed orders. No one obeyed. The emotional cascade from the Testament had broken something in species that had forgotten what it meant to feel. Or perhaps it had awakened something. Desperate. Thorn commanded his flagship to continue alone. If no one else would destroy Earth, he would do it himself. His ship broke through the human defensive line. It entered hyperspace, heading directly for Earth's sundot in the Sovereign Chamber. The Supreme Arbiter watched the tactical display. His tears had dried. His form had stabilized. But he was no longer the same being who had threatened humanity hours before. "Can we stop him?" he asked. Priya shook her head. "Your ships cannot reach Earth in time. Thorn will arrive in 3 hours. Then your world is doomed." "No." Priya smiled that human smile again, the one that had confused and terrified the galaxy since this all began. "My world has been preparing for this. We have one last card to play." She activated a communication link to Earth. "General Okafor, execute final phase." On Earth, 37 human ships rose to meet Thorn's flagship. They were tiny compared to his vessel. They had no weapons that could penetrate his shields, but they were not trying to destroy him. They surrounded his ship. They matched his speed. They blocked his sensors with electronic interference. And then they did something impossible. They boarded him. Sergeant Rosembecki led the assault team. She had survived the pit of eternity. She had proven that humans did not know when to quit. She was going to prove it again. The battle inside Thorn's ship was brutal. His guards were elite warriors from a dozen species. They had centuries of combat experience. Rosa had something better. She had determination. She fought through corridors filled with fire. She lost soldiers at every turn. She took wounds that would have killed anyone else. She did not stop. When she finally reached the bridge, Thorn was waiting for her. He was a being of crystallized hatred, 8 feet tall, armored in metal that had been forged in the heart of a star. "You cannot stop me," he said. "I am eternal. You are nothing but meat." Rosa wiped blood from her face. She was barely stunned. Ending, her armor was shattered. She had perhaps minutes to live. "Maybe," she said. But meat does not give up. She attacked. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Rosa used every dirty trick humanity had invented in 10,000 years of warfare. She used her environment. She used surprise. She used the fact that Thorn had never faced an enemy who did not care if she died, as long as she took him with her. When it was over, Thorn lay broken on his own bridge. Rosa stood above him, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen wounds. "How?" Thorn gasped. "You are nothing. Your species is nothing." Rosa looked down at him with something like pity. "That is where you are wrong," she said. "We are not nothing. We are everything. Every moment of joy. Every act of courage. Every dream we have ever dreamed." She smiled. "We are human. And we never quit." In the Sovereign Chamber, the Supreme Arbiter watched as Thorn's ship stopped its approach. He watched as human medics saved Rosa's life. He watched as the galaxy exhaled. "It is over," he said. "No," Priya replied. "It is just beginning." She turned to face him, and there was steel in her eyes. "We demand a vote, Supreme Arbiter. A vote on full membership. A vote on a seat at your table. Not as petitioners. As equals." The Arbiter looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have earned that right," he said. "The vote will be held tomorrow." Tomorrow came. And the galaxy would never be the same. The vote was held in the Sovereign Chamber, exactly as the Supreme Arbiter had promised. 12,000 representatives from 900 species gathered to decide humanity's fate. For 3 days, they debated species that had felt the testament spoke in favor of humanity. They described the experience with words their languages had not used in millennia. They spoke of beauty and pain and hope. They spoke of what it felt like to be finite, to know that every moment mattered because moments would end. Species that had not felt the testament were suspicious. They saw humanity as a threat, a young, aggressive species that had hacked ancient archives, defied the Conclave's authority, and somehow defeated this purification fleet. They warned that giving such a species power would lead to disaster. The debate went back and forth. Alliances shifted. Old enemies found common ground. Old friends discovered they no longer agreed. On the third day, Representative Veneth of the Morlani Collective asked to speak. His people were philosophers. They processed reality through collective thought. They had watched humanity from the beginning, and they had reached a conclusion. For 900,000 years, Veneth said, we Morlani have prided ourselves on our pursuit of truth. We believed we understood the universe. We believed we had seen everything worth seeing. He paused. We were wrong. His hive mind spoke as one, their voices echoing through the vast chamber. The humans showed us something we had forgotten. They showed us that meaning does not come from perfection. It comes from the courage to be imperfect. It comes from the willingness to feel, even when feeling hurts. It comes from the choice to hope, even when hope seems foolish. He turned to face the assembly. The question before us is not whether humanity deserves a seat at this table. The question is whether we deserve to sit beside them, whether we have the courage to remember what we used to be before we became so powerful that we forgot why power matters. When he finished, there was silence. Then the vote was called. Species voted one by one. The numbers were close. Too close. Priya watched the count rise, her heart pounding, her hands steady. The final vote came from the Supreme Arbiter himself. He had never voted on a membership question before. He had never needed to. But this time, he rose from his throne and spoke. I have ruled this chamber for 300,000 years, he said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die and be reborn. I believed there was nothing left that could surprise me. He looked at Priya. I was wrong. His voice grew stronger. What the humans gave us was not a weapon. It was not a trick. It was a gift. The gift of remembering. The gift of feeling. The gift of hope. He raised his hand. I vote yes. Humanity shall have their seat at this table. And may they remind us, every day, of what we are capable of becoming. The vote passed by 17. In the aftermath, many things changed. The purification fleet was disbanded. Its commanders were tried for their crimes. Thorn was sentenced to drift forever in the void, unable to die, unable to escape his own thoughts. The Conclave's laws were rewritten. The million-year requirement for membership was abolished. New principles were adopted, many of them inspired by human philosophy. The inherent value of all life, the importance of diversity, the recognition that wisdom comes from experience rather than age. Humanity was granted not just a seat, but a voice in shaping the new order. The witnesses approached Priya one final time before she returned to Earth. We must tell you something, they said. When we saw your future, we saw more than one path. In some futures, you failed. Earth burned. Humanity was forgotten. But we did not fail, Priya said. No, but we must ask, how did you know? How did you know the testament would work? How did you know the arbiter would change? Priya was quiet for a moment. We did not know, she admitted. We hoped. We believed. We trusted that if we showed the galaxy who we truly are, at our best and our worst, someone would listen. And if no one had? Priya smiled that human smile. Then we would have tried something else. And something else after that. and something else after that, until we found a way, or until there was no one left to try. The witnesses stared at her. That, they finally said, is exactly what makes you terrifying. Priya returned to Earth as a hero. Crowds gathered to welcome her home. Leaders of every nation came to shake her hand. Children looked up at her with wonder in their eyes, but when reporters asked about her accomplishment, she shook her head. "It was not my accomplishment," she said. "It was humanity's. Every artist who created the Testament, every soldier who held the line, every scientist who cracked the impossible codes, every parent who raised children to believe that tomorrow could be better than today." She looked up at the stars, stars that now welcomed humanity's ships, humanity's ideas, humanity's dreams. We did not demand a seat at the galactic table because we thought we were better than anyone else. We demanded it because we knew we had something to offer, something the galaxy had forgotten. What was that? A reporter asked. Priya smiled one last time. Hope. 100 years passed. The galactic conclave was transformed. Hundreds of new species had been admitted under the reformed rules. Art and music and philosophy, concepts that were dying in the old conclave, now flourished across 1,000 worlds. In the sovereign chamber, a new statue stood beside the ancient thrones. It showed a small human woman holding a data crystal above her head. The inscription beneath it read, "She reminded us why we exist." Sergeant Rosa Mbeki, now Admiral Mbeki, commanded the first joint human-alien exploration fleet. She had never stopped fighting, never stopped pushing, never stopped believing. Dr. Marcus Fell won the galaxy's highest award for mathematics. His solution to the ancient paradox had opened doors that species had not known existed. He still claimed he just got lucky. General Amara Okafor retired to a small farm in Kenya. She said she had seen enough stars for one lifetime. She spent her days watching the sunset and smiling at the sky. And in the mathematical dimensions, the collective of thought discovered something remarkable. They learned to dream. The equations they created now were not just logical. They were beautiful. And every time they looked upon that beauty, they thought of the clever animals from the small blue world who had taught them something 11 million years of existence never could. That meaning is not found in perfection. It is found in the courage to be imperfect. It is found in the willingness to feel. It is found in the simple, stubborn human choice to hope. Far across the galaxy, on a world that had been forgotten for 1 billion years, a young being looked up at the night sky. She had just received a message from the conclave. Her species had been invited to join the galactic community. The message was short. It was welcoming. And at the end, it contained a single piece of advice. Do not be afraid. There is a species called humans who will help you find your way. They are small and strange and feel everything too deeply. But they have good hearts. And they never give up. The young being read the message 3 times. Then she looked at the stars with new eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt something she could not name. Later, she would learn that humans called it hope, and so the legacy continued. Across the galaxy, species that had forgotten how to dream began to dream again. Species that had lost the ability to feel began to feel again. Species that had given up on tomorrow began to believe. Again. All because one small species from one small world refused to accept no for an answer. All because humanity demanded a seat at the galactic table, and the galaxy was forever changed.